I invited my aunt and uncle to my graduation instead of my parents because they supported me through college, and now my parents want back in after ignoring me. Hi, so I 20 female am graduating in a couple of days. Traditionally, kids invite their parents to their graduation ceremony, but I decided to invite my uncle and my aunt, and I have my reasons for it. It's because they were the ones who took over and paid for all my expenses while I was in college, because my parents said that they couldn't afford to do that. When I was in high school, my parents had had a discussion with me, and they told me that they were saving up for retirement, and they had a future aside from me as well. So they expected me to take care of my own college tuition and other expenses, because I was also turning 18. And now that I was an adult, I had to be able to take care of myself. I told them I was cool with it, because I didn't want to have to beg for money from them. I also had sort of guessed it, because they had always been very stingy with money when it came to me, and never seemed to want to spend it on anything apart from themselves. So I never had any expectations from them to pay off my college tuition to begin with. I had always known that I would have to look out for myself once I turned 18, and because I knew that, I had already spoken to my uncle about it, and he had told me that he would cover me until I graduated and got a job. My uncle is my dad's older brother, and I was always a lot closer to him and his family than my own parents, to be honest. The reason for this was that when I was younger, my parents would always drop me off at their place and go off to have their own fun, and they would end up babysitting me. This used to happen quite frequently, and they never seemed to have any complaints about it. I practically grew up with them, and so when I came to them with my request, they did not decline it and didn't even need to think twice before saying yes. Besides, my uncle was a surgeon, and my aunt was also a doctor, so they were pretty well off and did not need to worry about money, and my cousin, their son, had already graduated a couple of years back. So they agreed quite readily. I even offered to pay them back when the time came, and when I could afford to. But they said that there was no need for any of it. They said that I was nothing less than their daughter, and they would be happy to help me. So naturally, when I had the choice to invite somebody to my graduation ceremony, I chose them in a heartbeat. Everybody could only buy 4 tickets at most, since there was limited seating and a lot of people in my year. I chose to buy just 3 tickets and invited my uncle's family, including my cousin, since he and I are also pretty close. I could have chosen to invite my parents, but I did not do so on purpose because honestly, I have never been particularly close to them, and I did not see any reason to have them at my graduation ceremony. I did not even think that they would be interested in attending, but I think I was wrong. A couple of days back, my parents asked me if I had thought about who I was inviting to my graduation ceremony, and I told them that I had already asked my uncle's family to attend. They seemed quite shocked at that. I really don't even understand why, because for the past couple of years since I started college, they had barely kept in touch with me. I would go home occasionally, but even then, they would just mind their own business, and I barely even spoke to them. We live in the same house, but that didn't necessarily translate into us being close. Even when I would go home, they had their own lives and would constantly go out with their friend circle from college, and I would end up hanging out at my uncle's place because my cousin and I used to coordinate our timings and come back home around the same time, so we could all hang out. My uncle's family and home felt more like my own as compared to my parents'. Also, I found it very strange that my parents had claimed that they did not have the money to send me to college and cover my expenses there. But they were completely fine with spending so much money while hanging out with their friends, because I had kept tabs on them while I was at college, and I knew that they were living it up. They would go to expensive and fancy places with their friends, and would occasionally take short trips or even vacations with the same circle of people. Everybody in that circle was pretty rich, and even my parents had their own business, so their lifestyle was not too shabby either. It was genuinely just a question of what they wanted to spend money on, and I was not something that they thought was a good investment. I guess it was because they couldn't show me off on social media to highlight their lavish lifestyle. But guess what? I was wrong about that as well, because on that phone call, after I told them that I had already invited my uncle's family, my dad told me that he wanted me to get tickets for them to attend as well, because he had already bragged about me to a bunch of his friends, And if he didn't even end up getting invited to the graduation ceremony, then he and my mother would end up looking like fools. And that's how the fight started. Because when I told them that we could only purchase 4 tickets per person, and I had already bought 3, so I really couldn't invite them, they completely lost it on me. They brought up how they had raised me and spent so much money on me as a child. Actually, let me rephrase that. Their exact words were, "We have invested so much time and money in you, and this is how you repay us." So obviously, I'm an investment to them. Like any other normal person, I found that very offensive. And I told them that they had only ever done the bare minimum for me, and even that was because they wanted to show off. They never spent anything more on me than they wanted to, and I never even complained about it. And they were the ones who had decided not to pay for me to go to college. They had no right to expect anything from me. I was the only person in my family, in my generation, who went to public school because my parents thought that it would be a waste of money to send me to private school when I could get the same kind of education and life experiences at public school. I'm not complaining about it. I found a lot of friends and had a lot of fun there. But still, they just wanted to save up money because they did not think I was worth spending anything on. Even when I was little, it was never as if they never had the money. But whenever I asked them for anything, they always complained about how much they had already done for me and how I was being ungrateful by asking for more. So after a while, I learned to keep my mouth shut and not ask for anything at all, not even new clothes or anything. I would actually have to wait for them to notice that I had outgrown my old ones, and only then would they take me shopping. And I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't even do that. But if they didn't, it would make other people question their image since they didn't want to be known as the parents of the kid who wore the same clothes for years. Even when I got my first phone, it was a gift from my aunt. They did not buy it for me. For my entire life, I was living at their mercy. And they were clever enough to keep me hidden away from their circle of friends that they were so desperate to impress, so I wouldn't embarrass them and ruin their carefully curated image. They never bothered to build a good relationship with me, and now they thought that I would invite them to my graduation ceremony just because they had bragged about me to impress their friends. We got into an argument on the phone, and I told them that I was not going to invite them because I did not want them there. I also decided to remind them of this one thing that they had told me during the discussion that we had been having, where they had said that they were not going to be able to support me after I turned 18, and that I was an adult, so I needed to learn how to take care of myself. I turned the tables, and I told them that now that I was an adult, I was on my own. They had made that very clear when I was in high school, and even before I had started college, they had shown me that they did not care about me, so now they couldn't exactly blame me for not wanting them around. I was an adult. I was free to make my own choices, and I had made my choices about who I wanted to call my family. My uncle and my aunt were people who had actually been there for me all along, so now they were my only family, and I did not want anything to do with my parents. After saying that, I hung up on them and I blocked their phone numbers. So far, I had only kept in touch with them out of courtesy, but now, after everything that had happened, I did not feel the need to speak to them anymore. I was incredibly pissed off, and I even discussed this with my uncle. And he told me that he did not think that there was anything wrong with what I had done, so that validated my actions, and I didn't feel the need to look back. But then yesterday, I received an email from my dad. In it, he had basically said that the reason he had never spent a ton of money on me was because he wanted me to grow up to be humble and did not want to spoil me. Apparently, he and my mom had always thought that we had a good relationship, which is why they wanted me to be independent. They did not realize that I had misunderstood them and thought that they did not care about me. But now they could see that they had lost me to my uncle and said that they just wanted one more chance to make things right with me. So they are asking me to unblock them and send them tickets to the graduation ceremony so that they can attend and at least try to fix our relationship. They said that they are not going to post it anywhere and not even going to tell anybody about it, but they just need a chance to make things right with me, and they are practically begging me to give them that chance. They also brought up the fact that I had literally invited my cousin to the ceremony, but not them, and they thought that it was really unfair and insulting. and they thought that I should just purchase one extra ticket and invite them instead. But I don't know what to say to that since my cousin and I are pretty tight and are very good friends. I feel super guilty because I really don't want to do any of those things. I just kept rereading that email again and again, and I know that they are just saying things for the sake of it, but I still feel guilty. Their tone in the email was really sad, and I guess that's why I'm feeling guilty. I just want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. So, IET for inviting my uncle's family to my graduation ceremony instead of my parents? Edit. Hi. So, some of you wanted to know why exactly my parents had bragged about me to their friends. Well, actually, I'm graduating from one of the most reputed business schools in the state, so I guess that's why they had bragged about me. I hope that clears things up for people. Also, some people wanted to know why I had even bothered to stay with my parents or keep in touch with them for so long. I had stayed with my parents for so long because I had nowhere else to go. I know that if I had asked my uncle to take me in, he would have done so gladly, but I didn't feel comfortable doing that earlier. The reason I even went to my uncle to ask him for help with my college tuition was because initially I had intended to ask him to become a cosigner for the student loan that I was about to take out. However, he was the one who suggested that he pay off all my tuition and other expenses, so I didn't actually go to him with the intention of asking him to cover all these expenses. But I'm very thankful and very lucky that he and my aunt were so kind to me. Secondly, the reason I had kept in touch with my parents so far was because I felt obliged to do it. If I'm being honest, I guess I was just so used to being ignored by them that it had become normalized for me. I did not think that there was anything wrong with the way they were treating me, but now, after reading some of the comments that you guys have left on my post, I realize that I should have just cut them off the day that I left for college. I did have some sort of emotional attachment with them, like kids mostly do, and I can't hold that against myself. Anyway, I had my reasons, and I hope this edit clears things up for the questions that people were asking me. Update 1. So I'm keeping my parents blocked. The majority of the comments on my post said that I was NTA, and I did not need to forgive my parents, because they were not really sorry. I kind of agree, because after reading the email a couple more times, I realized that they had done everything but apologized. They just kept trying to justify whatever they had done, and honestly, it was a load of baloney. The entire email felt a bit fake, and I could tell that even though they had said that they were not going to post it anywhere, there was no telling what they might or might not do. I'm pretty sure that they wanted to impress their friends, which is why they were so desperate to get an invitation to my graduation ceremony. Anyway, that's not going to happen, so they can give up hope. It'll be almost a week since I blocked my parents, and the graduation ceremony is in 3 days. This afternoon, my uncle and my aunt surprised me by flying in 2 days early. They were supposed to arrive on the day of the ceremony, but they decided to show up earlier because they wanted to spend some time with me. My cousin, however, will still be arriving on the day of the ceremony because he got caught up with some last-minute work. Because they had arrived earlier, I got the chance to speak to them in person about what was going on with my parents. When I mentioned to them that one of the major reasons my parents wanted an invitation to my graduation ceremony was not because they genuinely wanted to be there for me, but because they had already bragged about me to their friends and wanted to impress them, my uncle told me that it was so typical of my father to do something like that, and honestly, he was not surprised that things had turned out to be this way. Because right from when he was a kid, my dad was apparently very conscious about his image, even when he was in school. He would always hang out with the rich and popular kids on purpose because he wanted to be seen as one of them, even though their family was not that wealthy. The same thing continued well into adulthood, and thankfully, he was able to find my mother, who had the same disease and wanted to be constantly perceived as somebody she was not, so they ended up in the shallowest friend circle. Now, since I was finally old enough to know these things, my uncle told me that a lot of people that my father was friends with were really terrible human beings. Apparently, most of the people in his friend circle currently were either caught up in extramarital affairs or shady businesses, but all of them pretended like everything in their life was perfect. And he thought that it was ridiculous of my father to still care about what these people thought of him, even at his age, and even at the cost of their relationship with me. After talking about these things with my uncle, I felt a lot better about my decision, and any trace of guilt that I was feeling just went away on its own. My parents were just being fake, and I don't need to entertain that or feel sorry about not inviting them. Anyway, I'm going to spend the next 2 days with my uncle and aunt as well, and I just hope that my parents don't try to pull off anything funny on the day of the graduation ceremony, because that will be really embarrassing. But I wouldn't put it past them, to be honest. Update 2. Hi, so I graduated today, and it was a fantastic day. Well, apart from one tiny little thing that happened after the ceremony. The ceremony went smoothly, and I couldn't have been happier about it. But then, once we left so we could grab some lunch at a nearby restaurant, I received several notifications from a bunch of relatives, and so did my uncle, aunt, and cousin. Apparently, my parents had taken to social media to rant about how I was being horrible to them and how my uncle and his family had stolen me from them by brainwashing me against them. Several of our family members had seen that post and sent screenshots of it to us to ask about what was going on. I had my parents blocked, so I couldn't see that post, but the rest of them saw it, and we were all quite irked by the accusations in the post. My parents had said that apparently I had already been having a lot of issues with them because they had wanted me to be independent, but I had been acting quite entitled. And they thanked my uncle and my aunt for it because they believed that it was their influence that was making me act like that. They had claimed that I had been demanding that they cover my college tuition just because I had noticed that my uncle and my aunt had covered all the expenses, and even more for my cousin when he started college. So now I expected the same. My parents insisted that they had always wanted to raise me to be humble and modest, and most importantly, they had wanted me to be independent. So that was why they had refused to help me out with my college expenses and said that I would have to figure it out on my own. But instead of taking that as a challenge and taking it up positively, I decided to go and complain about it to my uncle and aunt. And so, not only did they help me out with the tuition and completely negate what my parents had said, they also decided to brainwash me against them so they could have me to themselves. That's why they had not been invited to my graduation ceremony, which was why they were putting up this post, because they were so incredibly disappointed. The reason that my parents believed my uncle and aunt had done something like this was because they were jealous of my parents. Apparently, my uncle and aunt had conceived another baby a couple of years after my cousin was born, but unfortunately, my aunt had a miscarriage, and they lost that baby. So my parents believed that they were projecting and treating me like their own daughter and trying to turn me against them, because in some sick way, they thought that I was the baby that they had lost. Because I was conceived a couple of months after her miscarriage. I thought it was a horrible thing to say, because even though the rest of the post was absolute nonsense, that part was actually true. My aunt had indeed had a miscarriage a couple of months before I was born. At the time, it was still too early to tell whether it would have been a girl or not, but my aunt had always said that she felt that it might have been a girl. So when I was born, my uncle and my aunt were really happy, and they always thought of me as the daughter they never had, and treated me as such. It was really lovely and wholesome, but my parents twisted it into something ugly and disturbing, and honestly, I don't think anybody in the world apart from my parents would be able to do something like that. For them to bring it up so publicly and try to make my uncle and my aunt seem like crazy people was really awful, and I got very mad when I read that post. It was entirely nonsensical, and I really wanted to call them out on it, so I almost unblocked them. But my uncle stopped me from doing it and said that it was not even worth my reaction. He told me that he would deal with it himself, but I did not need to get involved and bother myself with it. It would be better for me to just keep them blocked, because otherwise they were just going to keep trying to get under my skin. Besides, everybody in the family already knew what kind of person my father was, so it was not like anybody was going to take that post seriously. The reason people were sending that to us was because they did not believe a word of it and thought that we should know. People were already on my side. I did not need to react to any of this. So after that, we just grabbed lunch and went on with our day, and ignored that post. I think that's the best way to deal with all of this, because I'm pretty sure that they were really mad that we did not even dignify their post with a reaction. I don't know if they have taken that post down yet or not, and neither do I honestly care. I had a great day today, and not even my parents' attention seeking antics could put a damper on it. I've left it all up to my uncle and aunt how to deal with them, because the majority of the accusations were against them and not me. So I'm going to do what he said and ignore my parents. Probably for the rest of my life. Update 3. Hey, so it's been a couple of weeks since I graduated, and I've been applying for jobs and sitting for interviews for the past few weeks. I have hardly had any time to bother myself with what's going on with my parents and stuff. I've moved back since college is over now, but I obviously cannot go back to my parents' house, so I have been living with my uncle. From what I know, my uncle had a discussion with my father and had the post taken down. Apparently, my uncle had told my father that if he did not take the post down, he would be forced to take legal action against him and file a defamation lawsuit. Obviously, my uncle did not actually have any intention of doing that, but he just wanted to intimidate my dad into taking it down, and it actually worked. One would think that after that, my parents would back off and not bother me again, but a couple of days back, they decided to reach out to me once more. I guess somehow they found out that I was living with my uncle and hadn't even bothered to come back to them after I had graduated. I had them blocked everywhere, so they couldn't reach out to me easily, so they created a new email account and sent me an email saying that they wanted to talk to me about what was going on. That was almost 4 days back, and I did not respond to that email because I did not have any intention of speaking to them, but I forgot to block them, and so, unfortunately, I had to read what they sent next, because I couldn't help my curiosity. 2 days back, after I ignored their last email, they sent me another one saying that they were very disappointed with the way I was acting, and they wanted me to know that my uncle did not have my best interests at heart, and that he was just manipulating me against them because he and my aunt were sick in the head. And while reading that, I was like, blah blah blah, just find something new to say. But after that, towards the end of the email, my parents said something super disgusting. They said that my uncle had threatened legal action against them for putting up that post, and that obviously meant that he was scared of something. So they wanted me to wake up and realize that both my uncle and my aunt are screwed up in the head, and I should stay away from them because, according to my parents, the only reason they lost their first baby was because they were not the right kind of people to have a girl. And I don't even want to get into what that implies. They said that the reason God made my aunt have a miscarriage was because even he knew that they were not fit to be parents to a girl. And so they wanted me to come back home before it was too late for me. It was so disgusting, I couldn't hold myself back, and I ended up writing back to them. I said that they were claiming that my uncle and aunt were sick in the head, when in reality, I had never met or ever spoken to anybody who was more sick in the head than them. I told them I was living a better life with my uncle and my aunt than I would ever have been living with them, and I never wanted to speak to them again. I told them that if they bothered me again, I would be taking legal action against them, and I would definitely file for a restraining order because I thought that they were disgusting and crazy and they didn't deserve to be part of my life. After that, I blocked that email address, and since then, I haven't heard anything from them. I also haven't said anything about that particular email to my uncle or my aunt, because I know that they would be very hurt and disturbed by the things that my parents have said about them, and I don't want to put them through that, but I need to talk about it and get it off my chest somewhere, which is why I posted it here. I don't think I'm going to tell them because that email was really nasty and hurtful. Anyway, I know that I'm here for them, and they are always there for me, and that's all that matters. My parents can believe whatever they want to and say whatever they want to. It's not going to change the truth, and I'm definitely not going to let it affect me anymore. Update 4. Hi! So it's been a couple of months since I found a job and started working. Now I have moved out of my uncle's apartment. I moved out just a couple of weeks back, but I live pretty close to them so I can just drop in for a visit whenever I want to. I have not had any contact with my parents after my last update, and I'm very thankful for it, because I really don't wish to ever speak with them again. From what I know, they are still hanging out with the same group of people and are trying their best to impress them. Good luck with their retirement fund. I think at the rate that they're spending their money, they are definitely going to need all the luck they can find, because one thing's for sure, even if they end up broken on the streets, I'm not going to be helping them out. Anyway, Things are going great for me right now. I'm getting into the groove of living on my own, and it's pretty fun, to be honest.